And joining me now is Professor Caroline Heldman, a political expert from Occidental College. Thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure, Liz.
Now, we've seen Kamala Harris get a bump in the polls, as we just mentioned, after President Biden stepped down from the ticket. But when you dig a little deeper, a lot of voters still really don't know what Kamala Harris stands for. Do you think that's something she's going to have to define this week at the convention?
Oh, absolutely. I think all of these things that we typically, as political scientists or pundits, say don't really matter, like debates or conventions. You know, we talk about them in terms of a bounce, a sugar high that quickly evaporates. For Kamala Harris, she doesn't have that luxury. As you just pointed out, or Anthony pointed out, a third of voters don't know who she is yet. And that's because she just joined the race and she's been very curated and closed about the messaging she's putting out. We have seen her economic policy, which, as you noted, is the #1 issue driving this election. But we don't quite know where she stands on a lot of issues. So we will hear policy proposals all this week, immigration, the economy, abortion. We'll probably also hear about climate change.
Now, President Joe Biden, again, is going to speak tonight. Evening expected to be also a real tribute to him and his legacy. But it's really a delicate dance for Kamala Harris, isn't it? I mean, showing support for Joe Biden while also showing that she's different from him.
That's right. And tonight, it's kind of an unusual thing, right? We typically get the luminaries of the party. It builds up toward the end. It's the opposite here. We have the President of the United States speaking on a Monday, and he is disappearing from Chicago. And it speaks to what you're asking about, Liz, which is she needs to differentiate herself. So the polling that Anthony just provided, I mean, that's 85% of Americans think that she is pretty much the same as Biden, 1 in 5 thinking she's exactly the same. So she has a lot of work to do to distance herself from some of his less favorable policies, for example, economics. She's taking a stronger stance on Gaza. So she will be, throughout this week, members of the party and certainly Harris will be differentiating her from Joe Biden.
Now, we've also seen a real push by Democrats to attract those younger voters. We've seen them utilize social media like TikTok and even the song choices at her campaign events. How important is the youth vote in this particular election, do you think?
It's a big chunk of the electorate. We are seeing that youth voters, young voters are swinging to Kamala Harris, whereas Biden was losing them. And if you look at RFK, his support, a lot of young folks, it dropped from 9% to 5% the moment pretty much she entered the race. So she is restoring the Democratic support for the party, and that's primarily with men of color, Latino and Black men, and also young voters. So the more she can speak about getting a ceasefire in Gaza and the more she can speak about the environment, which are two issues that are key for young voters, the better she'll do with that demographic.
So what do Democrats really need to accomplish this week? On Friday, we have the final report card. I mean, we saw Donald Trump gain momentum after the assassination attempt, as well as announcing his VP pick right before he formally accepted the nomination. Do Democrats need to match the energy of the Republican convention?
Well, they do. And the Republican convention, if you recall, was exuberant because it seemed like he was going to coast to a win. That's Donald Trump. The Democratic convention, I think, will actually have a different tenor. So they're certainly setting it up to be, you know, kind of this apocalyptic talk from Trump versus joy and hope, and also the past versus the future. But they will absolutely, if they're smart about this, and I think they are, define her as an underdog because she is an underdog. There are a couple of things happening here. So even though Harris is up in polls, Democrats actually have a bias in national polls because the Electoral College really favors those smaller rural states. And a lot of Democrats are clustered in urban areas. And so the votes are, quote unquote, wasted in their state. And so she really needs to be up 3 to 4 percentage points. And she'll be an historic pick. She is a woman. She's a woman of color. And this is a Black woman. We've never had a Black woman governor in the United States, let alone president. So they need to define her as an underdog because she does have some barriers working against her.
All right, Professor Caroline Heldman, thank you so much.
Thank you, Liz.
Thanks so much for watching. To view more content like this, we've selected some videos we think you'll enjoy. So please be sure to hit like and then click the link in the left-hand bottom corner to subscribe.